Hi Stephanie, so we've got another set of essays from you. This time we've got the stacked bar chart with the cars. Let's see what you wrote here. The graph represents sales of 3 different kinds of cars in 9 countries in 2018. Out of all 9 countries, Hungary sold the highest number of cars, whereas Belgium sold the least, with a total of little under 100 cars. Now, yes, but no. Let me tell you why. I'm glad that you understood this, and you talked about Hungary's total number. Belgium is not entirely accurate. Let me tell you why. Look, you see these 3 zeros? That means that this number is in the thousands. So it's inaccurate to say 100 cars. It's under 100,000. Okay? Now, the other problem with this is that this is your overview. And so your overview really should not include any data. Because when you start talking about data, it stops being an overview, and really it's just a detailed paragraph. So let's rewrite it so that it doesn't include any data, and then you've got an okay overview. So out of all 9 countries, Hungary sold the highest amount of cars, whereas Belgium sold the least. Full stop. That's it. And then you're done with your overview. Move on. There was no significant difference in sales for Germany, Ireland, and Holland. Germany, Ireland, Holland. Good. Although I don't know why you started with those 3 countries. That's a little confusing. However, there was a remarkable difference in sales of each brand. Approximately 50% of Holland's total sales were for the brand Ford. In contrast, Germany sold only 5% of that brand and sold a significant amount more Audis, which was about half their total number of car sales. Okay. Italy and Belgium, so now I've talked about these 3. Okay. Italy and Belgium sold a similar number of cars, although Belgium's, okay, you need an apostrophe S, main sales were Ford cars. Poland and the UK only differed slightly in their total numbers of sales. Poland, okay, and UK. True, okay. Let's see. Poland and UK only differed slightly in their total numbers of sales. All right. The UK sold 200,000 cars, whereas Poland sold about 10% more. France had the second highest number in its car sales. Second highest, okay. A little over 300,000 were sold, and there was a similar number between different brands of cars. Each kind sold was about 1/3 of their total sales. All right. So I thought that the way you organized this was really interesting. There were some things I liked, and there were some things that were not so effective. So let's take it from the beginning, okay? You had your overview here. You talked about Hungary, and you talked about Belgium. Let's talk a little bit about your overview. In addition to what we've already said, just because you mentioned Hungary and Belgium in your overview, it does not mean that you are done with those 2 countries and that's it. You don't have to talk about them again. That's actually not the case at all. The overview, again, is just kind of like a general summary of the main trends, of the main thing you see, and then you are expected to talk about those countries again, but this time in more detail, assuming that it's necessary. And it is necessary, absolutely, considering that they had the highest and the lowest number of sales. So the fact that you didn't mention them again in your detailed description is not such a great thing. Okay, you should have. Now, I then thought it was kind of strange for you to start off your detailed paragraph with these 3 middle-of-the-road countries, and then you went to, which countries did you go to? Yeah, so you spent an entire paragraph talking just about those 3 countries, which was kind of strange. Okay, considering that you had 9 countries. And then in the next paragraph, you talked about Italy and Belgium. So we've now covered 5, and then 6, 7. So I understand what your logic was, but again, I have to tell you it wasn't such a good idea because you were supposed to talk about Hungary and Belgium in more detail. Okay? So that's the first thing. Then, I don't think you talked about the individual brands enough. You really focused quite a bit on the total number of car sales and less than you should have on the individual brands. So what happens is it's a task one where the progression of your ideas isn't completely logical, and it does feel like some information was missing. Now, there is no one way to do task one, obviously. This is something I say a lot. There are multiple ways to do it. However, I have found that certain ways kind of lend themselves to a clearer, better structured answer than others. So if I can, I'd like to give you some suggestions on what I think makes a very well organized, clear answer. And in this particular one, it has to do with grouping. Why? You have to group here because you have a ton of information. First of all, you have 27 pieces of information just with the individual car brands and the countries. 27. Now, if you add to that the total number, which really deserves its own amount of time here, then you're really looking at 36 pieces of information. So it's really quite a bit, which means that you cannot include everything, and you should not include everything. You're going to have to do some very smart editing and very smart grouping. So one of the things that I suggest is pretty much doing what you did here for your overview, but without the data. So yes, Hungary sold the highest number, whereas Belgium sold the least, and then you move on. For me, the next paragraph should really focus on this total number of cars in each country. So doing exactly what you did, I would have said that Hungary had the highest sales of all the other countries at almost 400,000. It was followed very closely by France, not very closely, but it was followed closely by France at just over 300,000. The least amount of cars sold were sold in Belgium at just under 100,000, followed by Italy at a little over 100,000. The remaining countries all sold between 200 and 300,000 cars. All right, and then you're done with that paragraph. You've covered that particular total, which you have to, because that's the whole reason why they've done it as a stacked chart, because the total is something that we're really concerned with. Now, in the next paragraph, what I would do is I would then focus on the individual car companies. BMW is the easiest one to talk about. So you can say that all the countries, all the 9 countries, no, not all the 9 countries, but the countries all sold approximately 100,000 BMWs in 2018, except for Belgium, which sold around 500, which sold around 5,000. Ford recorded high sales in Hungary and Holland at whatever that number is. It also did well in France and the UK, and in the rest of the countries sold between X and Y. If you could figure out what those numbers are really quickly, then you can do it. And then you can just have another very brief paragraph, or not even a paragraph, a section about Audi, just saying that Audi sold well in Hungary and Germany at that number. It did very poorly in UK, Belgium, and Italy. And then you're done. You don't even have to mention how it did in France, in Ireland, in Holland, and Poland, because that's like such a detail that it's not really important. So that's kind of how I would organize it. I hope that that makes sense. I hope that that's clear. It's a way that you can kind of wrap your head around this data, okay, and kind of visualize it, even if you don't have this bar chart in front of you. So that's my suggestion on how to do this. Now let's take a look at pollution. Climate change is an undeniable hot topic. I would say undeniably because this goes in front of an adjective. It should be an adverb. Pollution levels are constantly rising, which results in greater problems like global warming and severe natural disasters, for example. In certain ways, pollution levels can be lowered, maybe. However, it is clear that high pollution usually occurs in cities for many reasons. Okay. You didn't really tell us what the reasons are, did you? Remember, the question is asking, what are the reasons and how can it be solved? So when you're doing an essay like this, it has a pretty standard thesis statement. And the thesis statement is where you're essentially addressing the question. So really you just have to say, while there are many reasons for pollution in large cities, fortunately there are solutions available. And if you say something like that, you're pretty much covered, and then you can move on. But I don't really feel like your structure here for this introduction is particularly effective. Okay, I would have changed it around a little bit because it's difficult to gauge what the question is just based on your introduction. Okay, there are a number of reasons why larger cities generate a significant amount of pollution. Many people have their workplace in the city. To commute to work, people usually take the car, a bus, or a motorcycle, which results in enormous traffic problems and furthermore in high pollution levels. Another example is a high number of buildings and living areas in a city. Each building uses a massive amount of electricity. Not only do buildings, but also factories, which are either placed in the city or nearby, use a lot of produced energy. Factories as well. No, you don't mean factories as well. Factories also generate high pollution levels in manufacturing their products. All the buildings combined in a city create a great level of light pollution. All right, this almost feels, Stephanie, like a list, because look what happened. So you started off strong. You said that large cities have a lot of pollution because of certain factors that they have. So people commute to the city, they take their car, there's lots of traffic, and there's lots of pollution. You could have gone a step further to explore that, just saying something like, the carbon monoxide released into the air is what creates the pollution. Okay, and then you said that all of these buildings, a lot of electricity is used. Okay, well, how does that electricity produce pollution? You didn't really explain that. Let's see. Yeah, so I mean, were you trying to tell us that we use fossil fuels for this electricity? It wasn't really clear, but I do think it needed a little exploration. And then factories generate high pollution manufacturing their products. Okay, how? Why? Tell me. Because they use coal, because they use fossil fuels, because something. But it's not entirely clear, and it ends up feeling like a list, really, because you haven't entirely explored these issues. You just kind of, keep spitting them out like, oh, here's a reason, here's a reason, and here's a reason, without really truly exploring any of those reasons. Okay, so it is difficult to define a solution against pollution levels, all right? In my opinion, it should be industrial areas, including factories and larger, careful spelling, should be placed outside the city. This way, pollution is distributed better in larger, again, areas rather than in the middle of a city in a smaller space. Another solution would be to improve the traffic situation. People should be advised by their employer to commute by public transport and only take the car if there is no other option. As another solution, buses could be built to drive with electricity rather than gasoline. How would that help? If you're going to give me a solution, you absolutely must explain how it would solve the problem, why it would solve the problem, okay? Otherwise, it just feels like a list. To conclude, cities will always create more pollution than other smaller towns. However, eco-friendly solutions should be developed to lower the levels and still have the opportunity to keep a city as it was before. Okay, that's really nice. So you finished off nice and strong. I thought it was good. There were definitely some good elements to it, but there were some things that I wanted you to work on, okay? So go ahead and do that. Work on some of these areas and apply some of these suggestions that I made in this set to your next set of essays. I'll be waiting, so go ahead and get started on those. Good luck, Stephanie.